Welcome to the Tsinghua Week at Berkeley, and this is the panel hosted and organized by the Center for Studies of Higher Education on the campus, and I am Wenqin Ye, Director, Institute of East Asian Studies, and Professor of History. I am here serving this afternoon as your moderator for this panel. We have reshuffled the sequence of our presentation a couple of times. So our first speaker this afternoon is going to be Professor Judson King. Professor Judson King, of course, as you know, is the director of the Center for Studies in Higher Education. The center is a multidisciplinary research and policy center on higher education, oriented towards California, the nation, and comparative international issues. As its director, Jud King brings unparalleled experience as a distinguished Professor Emeritus of Chemical Engineering, former Dean of the College of Chemistry at Berkeley, and then also from 1995 to 2004, the UC, or University of California, Provost and Senior Vice President, the Senior Academic Administrator for the entire 10 campus of the University of California system. He was, in that office, responsible for the overall planning for the world's largest and most prestigious public higher education system. Those, of course, were also the years when the leaders of this university or this entire university system had to juggle with the issue of quality and expenditure or reduced budget. So as the system-wide provost, Jud King was responsible for academic planning and policies for 10 campuses and 3 national laboratories during a time marked by increasing demands on the system and reduction in funding. He oversaw several significant initiatives, including the planning for UC Merced campus, the dramatic expansion in the university's summer and extension programs to meet enrollment growth, and the California Digital Library. Berkeley is indeed fortunate that after his retirement from the UC President's office, Jud chose to return to Berkeley to bring his experience to bear as director of the Center for Studies in Higher Education. So it's with great pleasure that I present to you Professor Jud King.
Thank you for a very kind and even too long introduction. My role today is to talk some about trends in the breadth of undergraduate education in the United States. So how broad is undergraduate education? Now, I need to figure out what is happening here. And I need help. Thanks so much. Okay, there. Now that the engineer has been helped by somebody who really knows how these things work, let me proceed ahead. I'd like first to talk something about the spectrum of higher education opportunities in the United States. It is a very diverse system with very different institutions participating in it. There are public research universities, and the University of California is one of these. There are also elite private universities, one of which the Tsinghua University delegation will see tomorrow. There are private liberal arts colleges like Pomona, Amherst Williams, which serve an entirely different mission, undergraduate only and very directed to the liberal arts. There are what are called comprehensive public universities. The California State University system of 23 campuses is one of these. There are community colleges, which give a 2-year degree and which also train students for the first 2 years of what will be a 4-year baccalaureate education, with the student transferring to the 4-year institution for their last 2 years. And more recently, we see a considerable rise of for-profit universities, including ones that do very well on the New York Stock Exchange. So just to speak about U.S. colleges and universities and the breadth of undergraduate education is not going to work well because of all these dimensions. And instead, we need to recognize that all of these institutions exist and they all have distinct roles. However, all of them address one way or another the question of a liberal education. And I put up here the definition from the American Association of Colleges and Universities of what is a liberal education. I like the wording, and I think it's worth going through and thinking about. So an approach to learning that empowers individuals and prepares them to deal with complexity, diversity, and change. It provides students with broad knowledge of the wider world, meaning science, culture, and society, as well as in-depth study of a specific area of interest. So even here in this definition, the concept of general education plus a major comes into play. A liberal education helps students develop a sense of social responsibility, as well as strong and transferable intellectual and practical skills such as communication, analytical and problem-solving skills, and a demonstrated ability to apply knowledge and skills in real-world settings. If we can do that, we've done very well indeed. So let's trace how things got to where they are in the Western world and in the United States in particular. A few centuries ago, higher education just covered all of human knowledge, and words like natural philosophy were used to describe it. Then, as time went on, specific disciplines began to arise and differentiate their education from one another. We'll have more about that in a moment. As that happened, and in the early 20th century in the U.S., we got to where there was a concept of general education plus an undergraduate major. Now, the reason for these disciplines was finding that there were certain areas where you would have a set of powerful concepts, you could generalize, and you could develop methods that were applicable to many different situations, and thus knowledge became more powerful, and you, by learning this set of knowledge, be it economics or political science or chemical engineering, could then have the tools to address many different things through common concepts. This gained efficiency, it gained strong insights for addressing particular needs, and strong insights for generating further knowledge. All good. During the 20th century, the rest of the 20th century, postgraduate education grew, postdoctoral education came on the scene, and enabled more and more specialization. The other change that occurred in this country during the 20th century was a movement from a general education that had been specific courses on specific subjects before then, a move from that to what are now called distribution requirements. So you should take a course or two in this, a course or two in that, and a course or two in the other thing. More on that in a moment. And here we are. The College of Letters and Science at Berkeley, which is about 75% of our undergraduate students or so, has the following general education requirements. First of all, there are two that are at the level of the entire University of California. All campuses must fulfill this one. That's entry-level writing, also known as Subject A, and American History and Institutions. There is a requirement that is campus-wide that applies to all undergraduate students, not just the College of Letters and Science, and that is the American Cultures requirement, which requires taking a set of courses in areas that relate to the contributions of multiple cultures to the United States or world society. Then we get to what is specific to the College of Letters and Science. They have a reading and composition requirement, which can be met by any of a very few courses. There is a quantitative reasoning requirement. This is mathematics or computer science. There is a foreign language requirement, yes, even in the United States. And there is a 7-course breadth requirement, which we'll look at in more detail here. So the students in Letters and Science must take 7 courses, from these 7 areas, and no more than 2 from a single department. And the 7 areas you can see are ones that do cover the common spectrum of knowledge that might be applied to undergraduates. Significant here is international studies being one of these. This requirement can be fulfilled by our Education Abroad program, where the student actually goes overseas. Philosophy and values might strike you as a bit different. The sciences are most definitely represented here, and the social science, social and behavioral sciences. So those are the distribution requirements today in the College of Letters and Science at Berkeley. Now, this whole business of general education, specific courses that could be taken by all or most students, or distribution requirements, is very frequently studied. And so in the last decade, we have seen general education studies from Harvard, Yale, MIT, a number of other universities, and one that our Center for Studies in Higher Education was involved in, and that was a report organized and chaired by Neil Smeltzer of the Berkeley campus and Michael Judson of the San Diego campus, and carried out through the Center for Studies in Higher Education with support from 2 private foundations. The report looks like this. Just to give you an idea of the sort of thing it covered, I'm going to very quickly give you an idea of the 8 recommendations that came from the report. One was to recast and extend the role of the Chief Undergraduate Education Officer, or Dean, on campus. A second was to give high priority to incentive structures that encourage faculty to do general education, to teach those courses and devise them. The third was to develop thematic interdisciplinary bundles or sequences of courses around substantive and timely topics. The fourth was to advance civic education, education in government, and the involvement of students in civic activities. The fifth was to work with high schools, community colleges, and so forth to secure the place of general education there. The sixth was to pursue application of information and communication technologies in good ways for general education. The seventh was to educate all constituencies on the rationale and values of general education. And the eighth was to establish evaluation mechanisms through the academic senate and by other means. So it was not so much on the content, but on the how to get it done and how to make it work right. Well, this applies to colleges of letters and science and general undergraduates. Let's look now at the professions and what has happened to them. And so above the dotted line, you have a list of 5 major professions. And they are medicine, law, business and management, architecture, and public health. All of them have come to be based upon a liberal undergraduate education where the major can be in any of many things, and then the professional degree is the graduate degree. This is common throughout the U.S. It happened sort of haphazardly in most cases, but in one of them it did not. The Flexner report of the early part of the last century defined what should be for medicine, and medicine was extremely varied and unreproducible before then. The Flexner report is an example of a report that was done, this one through the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, that had enormous impact on the structure of the profession, led to the graduate degrees in medicine that we have today, led to the concept of pre-medical undergraduate education as liberal education with any of many majors, but take these 6 or 7 or 8 courses so as to be ready to go on to medical school. There is a profession that didn't do this, and it's my own, the last one on this slide, and that's engineering. Engineering in the United States remains a bachelor's level professional degree, and many graduates from the bachelor's program go out, get jobs in industry, and have full careers as engineers. But now I'm going to talk a little more about engineers, because I think there are immense changes in the environment for engineers in the world today, and these changes are continuing. One is the onset of globalization and broadband communication, which has made it possible to do engineering around the world, traveling with the sun, and to put specific engineering jobs in particular places that make most sense because of the talents of people there, or more likely because of the cost of people there. So there has been major outsourcing of engineering jobs from the United States to countries where the salary of the engineers is less. In fact, there has been a study in the U.S. called the 5XME study that was done in mechanical engineering. That's the ME. And the 5X is that if the United States engineer is to make 5 times as much as the engineer in another country, how can they be 5 times as valuable? Now, that concept has been pursued. Secondly, I've mentioned the migration of jobs among countries. I won't go over that anymore. But we also have major, major world challenges that are quite multidimensional and multidisciplinary. And 2 prime examples would be global warming and water supply, but there are many, many, many more. And engineers, more than more, have to interact with other disciplines, other people, other ways of thinking that are not engineering ways of thinking. Engineers must interface with the public much more because of issues such as environment, energy, biotechnology. All of these have enormous public interfaces. And more engineers need additional dimensions for upward mobility in business and government. So as I've said, it is currently an undergraduate degree. I took mine 50 years ago at Yale University, which is supposed to be a very broad liberal education. I did have a freshman English course. I had a required economics course. And I had an elective, which I took in political science, and all the rest of it was math, science, and engineering. And that's fairly characteristic of engineering in the U.S. even today. So I'm part of a group that believes that what the country needs to do is to work towards a graduate-level professional degree in engineering based upon a liberal undergraduate education, just like medicine, which one could even call a form of engineering. So I have one other topic I would like to spend a little time on, just to give a particularly Berkeley flavor, and that is the program of freshman and sophomore seminars that we have here. It came about 20 years ago, and it came about at a time when there was concern that undergraduate students were not getting individualized attention in sufficient amount, and that it would be very desirable to build one-on-one or small number-on-one interactions between undergraduate students and faculty. At that time, I was a provost for professional schools and colleges here, and so I had the other 25% of the Berkeley undergraduates as part of this picture. So what are these seminars? They're given in the freshman and sophomore years. They are given as overload by faculty. That is, the faculty still have their other regular teaching assignments. But the campus funds them some money for general expenses of not just the course, but their career, their research, whatever, in return for doing this. There were 78 of these offered this spring. So that's the number per semester. We're on the semester system, 20 years after the start of it. And I've had my own experience with one. After all, if a provost is going to say to his faculty, you better do these things, maybe the provost had better teach one too, and so I did. And mine was on chemical aspects of environmental change. And it ranged from global warming to environmental pollution issues of one sort or another. Tried to use nothing more than the concepts of high school or the first semester of freshman chemistry. Did not use mathematics. Brought together a group of students. They would typically be 15 or 20. About half of them would not be from engineering or the College of Chemistry, where chemical engineering is located. They would be from letters and science. And I saw a number of these people switch into science or engineering where they wouldn't have been there without the seminar. So it was a career changer for some of these. One of these is a very well-known chemistry professor at Princeton now, and another married one of my own graduate students and is now a mid-level executive with Procter & Gamble Corporation. And she had started out utterly non-scientific. So it leads to the, tying back to the engineers, and this will be my last thought, it leads to the point that nowadays people who go into engineering tend to be quite quantitative sorts. They're there because they like numbers and math and structuring things quantitatively. We need more dimensions than that in engineering. And it's going to take more things like this freshman and sophomore seminars or a liberal undergraduate education before one goes into the professional engineering program fully. It's going to take more things like that to draw a much more diverse array of people and a diverse array of ways of thinking into engineering. So that's some thoughts as to what Berkeley and the rest of the research universities in the U.S. are doing, and with regard to the specific field of engineering. Thanks. Once in.